we're going to read the bio of Mrs. Dr. June Soomer. Then after that, she will present her presentation. June Soomer bio. Honorable Ambassador Dr. June Soomer has devised experience through her work in the diplomatic, financial, and education sector, obtained through over 30 years of academic and professional experience, function at the managerial, operational, and technical levels. She has a sound understanding of contemporary development issues and continues to advocate for equality and sustainable development. Dr. Soomer is the first woman to receive a PhD in history from the University of West Indies Cayville campus, the first woman to serve as a St. Lucian ambassador to CARICOM and the OECS, the first woman to serve as OECS commissioner, the first woman to serve as a Secretary General of Association of Caribbean States, and the first woman to perform the role as a chair of the Open Campus, now Global Campus Council of University of West Indies since 2018. She has received numerous awards in the area of human resource management, diplomacy, regionale, zeg maar, development and leadership. This includes her country's highest award, the St. Lucia Cross, in the Order of St. Lucia for distinguished service in the fields of education, diplomacy, regionals, and development specialty in 2021. The José de Marcoleta Awards, Grand Cross for Diplomacy from Nicaragua 2021, the City of Santiago Awards for Outstanding Working for the Caribbean Business Forum in 2019, the Pelican Awards for the University of West Indies, and a distinguished graduate of the decade 1989 to 1998, and for excellence in diplomacy, public service, and promotion of regionalism on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the UIC in 2018. She also the UIA Cayville Awards for Leadership in 2018, Executive of the Year St. Kitts and Nevis in 23. She is also a consultant and recently completed the Sustainable Development Plan for Virgin Islands British Great. She also wrote strategic plans for small communities in St. Lucia. She has published on a regional integration, cricket issues and enslaved women and women of Africa descent, emancipation, reputation, and on the work of novel laureate Arthur Lewis. Currently, she serves as the chair of the Global Campus Council of the University of West Indies, as the chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descendants, and member of the St. Lucia Reparation Committee. We welcome Dr. Soomer.
Thank you very much. The only thing she didn't tell you was who my grandparents were. But I can tell you even before I start that one of the things that I have done recently is to do my DNA. It's something that I encourage all of you to do. And I discovered that I am 50%, not only one drop, 50% Bantu from Cameroon and Congo all the way down to South Africa. So I know who I am and where I'm from. So let me say what an honor it is to be here, and I would like to, the minister is gone, but I'd like to thank the foundation and the government and the people who have worked so hard to ensure that we have this engagement today. I also see it as an opportunity to bring a message of hope, obviously to people who have been laboring in the vineyards for so long, and who want to hear that the work that you have done over all of these years is starting to bear fruit. You want that message of hope so that you can continue and that you can encourage young people to also be part of this movement that will be even harder for us as we approach the second decade, given the global realities, and you know what I'm talking about. So, Mr. Ojo, I thank you for setting the stage, because you brought to us what Africa was about. And what I am here to tell you is a compliment to what he says, what global Africa is about. Not just the physical location of Africa, but Africa in our being. And that is what the Permanent Forum is trying to ensure that you understand as we undertake our work as a forum. I didn't do a PowerPoint presentation because I always think that you should look at me instead of a screen. I think I'm tall for a reason. No, but it's a lot of challenges that I faced coming in last night. First of all, not having the correct plugs and losing my suitcase, and but it is all good. And so I am going to share some of the information leading up to what we should be looking at in the second decade. And so today I thought I should concentrate, first of all, by giving you a background with regard to the Permanent Forum, but to tell you about the work that we are doing, especially in 4 specific areas which are extremely necessary for the second decade. And I will concentrate on reparatory justice and sustainable development. I will also be looking at the Declaration on People of African Descent, which we are trying to articulate, and to tell you that we need your voice in that articulation. And I'm saying your voice, especially people from Curacao, people from Aruba, people from Suriname, people from Bonaire, people from St. Martin. You understand the people I'm talking about? Those people that we do not hear in the rest of the Caribbean. So we want to hear your voice within the declaration, the articulation of that declaration. I'm also going to speak to you about some of the shortcomings, some of the achievements, but also some of the shortcomings of the first decade, and why it was necessary for us to advocate for a second decade, and what we want to do in the second decade, because we are not asking for a third decade. If we do not break the back of systemic racism in this decade, we are going to have a longer fight. So I want to tell you some of the things that we are doing as a Permanent Forum, and the follow-up especially to the Durban Declaration of 2001, because we are a result of the Durban Declaration, the Permanent Forum, but we are also a result of the decade. This perhaps is the major success of the decade, that it has given people of African descent a platform within the United Nations. It has given civil society a platform within the United Nations to articulate your views, and you should take full advantage of this forum. We have captured the imagination of people over the last 3 years. We have captured the imagination, especially of young people, over the last 3 years, who are looking to us for some kind of direction with regard to us as a diaspora, an African diaspora. And I can tell you that in Geneva, in our last session, we have had 3 sessions. We have one annually, because that's all the money we have. No more, you know, people of African descent, we're not getting any resources unless we ourselves invest in the forum. And we are doing this, the 10 of us are doing this voluntarily. We don't get paid for doing it. And so our advocacy is something that we take very seriously, because we are not wasting our time. And we have 10 members from throughout the world, 3 from the continent, 2 from the Caribbean, myself and Gaynell Curry from the Bahamas. We have 1 from Colombia, 1 from Costa Rica, 1 from the United States, 1 from Europe, and the other 3 from Morocco, the Ivory Coast, and Kenya. So we as a group understand that the Durban Declaration is really our foundational document, because that is the first time we got together to speak about our humanity. And our humanity is what we are fighting for all of these years. And so the Permanent Forum is trying to put in place actions, not just talk, but actions that will ensure that we reinforce that humanity, that we continue to strive for the dignity that we lost during enslavement. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. Language. Language. We were not slaves. We were enslaved. And because we were enslaved, we understand what it meant for you to destroy a human being, to make him believe mentally and physically that he was less than you. And we are trying to uplift people of African descent for us not to ensure that the pressures of the very well-designed colonialism that we live under do not continue to oppress us, and that we do not continue to oppress ourselves. And so we have to have these big people conversations so that we can now start speaking truth to some of the things that we have learned over the years, because we were not supposed to learn the truth at all. And so some of the objectives of the Permanent Forum include contributing to our full political, economic, and social inclusion. And one of the things that struck me, because we just had a consultation in Barbados, one of the things that struck me, even within the articulation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it was mentioned by our people in that conference, is that we continue, and Mr. Ojo said it, we continue to be portrayed as lesser beings, even when we have made major advancement. So they continue to take us back to the climbing of the trees, which we do very well, which is why we are such good athletes. And which is why we are such good dancers also, because when they put something in front of us, we have learned to sidestep and to backstep and to slide and so on, you know. So we are these creative, innovative people. And in articulating that contribution that we make, we have forgotten how innovative we are as a people. We have forgotten. We were there at creation. So we understand what it is to advance. and they continue to bring us back. And within the United Nations, even if we are doing this work, there's still not that awareness within the body. And so when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the first goal on poverty and reducing poverty is a dark-skinned African person. As if there is poverty nowhere else in the world. Nowhere else in the world there is poverty. But when you start to look at the goals, the pictures of the goals that for advancement, for example, for decent work, for technology and so on, you start to see people getting fairer and lighter and whiter. And so we are the depressed ones, forgetting what we have created over the centuries of trying to fight for our human rights. We are also supposed to coordinate with different mechanisms. There are many anti-racism mechanisms at the UN dealing with different things, but we are the ones who ensure that civil society is involved, and that's why I'm so happy to be here, because I can speak to a group of people who are not simply government officials. Some of you are government officials, but you are also activists, advocates. You understand these things. And so we are coordinating at all of these different levels. We are supposed to also present that data, the data on what we have found to the United Nations, and we are supposed to raise awareness and coordinate some of these issues. And as a newly established permanent forum, we are in the process of getting recognition. So over the last 3 years, we have done a number of things, even without financing. So let me highlight some of the things that we have done in articulating the 4 topics that I spoke to earlier, which also include the expectations of the second decade. But before I start, let me tell you, one of the things that is really important to the Permanent Forum is our advocacy with regard to the collection of data. We are almost invisible because of the way they collect data. Even in the Caribbean, we do not place an emphasis on the statistics that will make our health services better, our education services better, our social services better. We think because our leaders look like us, that there are things that they shouldn't do, you know. But we need to demand that they make sure that there's truth also in the data. It's not just data for data collection purposes or to say we have information. It is how you apply that to policy development and to the advancement of your people. So even if you have all of the information and you're not using it properly in policy development, you have a challenge. And we need to be able to do that. But even more important to us these days is the issue of AI. Because artificial intelligence has captured the imagination of people. Everybody's talking about AI and what we can do on the internet and so on. But we want you to know that unless we advocate for ethics within AI, we will remain invisible. In fact, we will become more invisible because you can go on the internet and look for African and Black doctors and you will not see us because AI does not recognize us in those fields. And we are becoming even more marginalized if we do not call for proper development, proper input, proper development of algorithms and ethics within AI. So that is one of the things we are calling for the second decade. And it's very important to us. So that data-driven approach is important. We are also calling for reparatory justice and sustainable development to work hand in hand. Because we are so far behind the 8 ball, we have not been able to achieve the sustainable development that we want. So we are calling for reparatory justice to address that. And we believe that there can be no sustainable development in the region and amongst people of African descent if reparatory justice is not also addressed. Reparatory justice for us is fundamental in recognizing the historical injustices that we have suffered and what we need to do to deal with those legacies. Just tell me when I'm over my time so I can move a little faster. I get very enthusiastic about these things, so, you know, you have to stop me. And so we have made a number of recommendations to the United Nations in our last reports with regard to getting an advisory position from the International Court of Justice on the legal question of reparatory justice for histories and legacies of colonialism and enslavement. We have called for a global fund towards addressing the lasting consequences of the transatlantic slave trade, enslavement, colonialism, apartheid, and genocide. We are asking for a UN Global Summit on reparatory justice. You know, one of the things that we have done is that we have had them realize there is now an awareness that the Sustainable Development Goals were not designed with us in mind. And now they're looking at an 18th Sustainable Development Goal on equality and equity. I think that is tremendous. We have also, in the last few months, with the help of Colombia, Colombia and Brazil have really come on board to assist. We have been able to get the issue of people of African descent and their biodiversity and their culture and all of these things mentioned in the Biodiversity Convention. This convention is 30 years old and it did not mention us. It didn't recognize the contributions that we made to protection of the environment. And so we are making steps and we are going to consolidate them in the second decade. We have also called for access to technology because that is one of the challenges that we face. And I already spoke to the issue of ethics, but more than that, we are calling for monitoring and evaluation of these things. It makes no sense to say that I have put this in place, but you must know the impact of what you put in place. And if you don't monitor and evaluate it, then you have a challenge. We also are trying to ensure that we coordinate across regions, especially the issue of reparatory justice. So in the Caribbean, we have a very advanced reparatory justice movement, but in many other parts of the world, it's not like that. So we are recommending that we take a more coordinated approach. It is only when we come together that we will be able to get reparatory justice. And we are so happy that Africa has come on board because they have declared this year, 2025, as a year for reparatory justice for Africans and people of African descent. So please, if you do not yet have a reparatory justice movement in Curacao, I'd be very happy to come and help you. I have been involved in the one in St. Lucia for a long time to make sure that we have that in place. And we believe that we need to have we must have comprehensive measures to address the socio-economic inequities faced by people of African descent in their countries, such as promoting land ownership. We have been doing that in Latin America, and a number of people in Latin America, in the Quilombos, in Brazil, along the Amazon, in Colombia, are starting to get access to their land. We want to see affordable housing. We want to see access to sustainable clean water, entrepreneurial power, microfinancing institutions develop, and economic models that will serve to empower people of African descent. It makes no sense talking if the institutions keep us out and do not give us access. So we must advocate for these things. Apart from that, we are also assisting with articulating the Declaration on the Human Rights of People of African Descent. And the forum has had its first major consultation, physical consultation, because we do virtual ones. We had our first physical one in Barbados in December with Caribbean society groups. We had about 60 civil society groups that were represented, and from the Bahamas all the way down to Suriname. And we are hopeful that you will become part of that conversation when we send out our notices. So we are helping in the articulation. This will be the first time that there is a declaration on the rights of people of African descent, as if we didn't have rights before. Because the human rights that they speak about broadly are just a veil over our human rights. Because when you have a broad brush, you do not look at the specifics. And we want them to see us, and we want them to know who we are. And so we are asking for that, these consultations to ensure that we have that declaration. The first decade, there was some successes. The forum is a success of the first forum, and there are some other legal rights and recognitions that people of African descent have all of a sudden discovered that they had. Let me tell you one of the things that has happened, for example, in Latin America, that was a very big success, the changing of the census. Remember I spoke about statistics? Before there was this broad brush called Latino and Latina. So you didn't know if you were of African descent, you don't know what you are exactly, where you should have your emphasis. And so with the change now in the census in Latin America, some countries who used to tell you, but we have no black people, all of a sudden have found out that more than 30%, and in the case of Brazil, more than 50% of the populations identify as people of African descent. And so that is a boost and that we received in the first decade, and we want to continue to work on that. We have also seen a lot of programs to build awareness, but more than that, I think when I said in a forum once that I didn't think there were many successes, the civil society people told me no. We as civil society have taken the opportunity to organize ourselves, and there are many mechanisms among civil society that will encourage that. We see a number of educational programs undertaken by people, like groups like UNESCO, and so we have had a number of successes, but of course we know that we have a number of deficiencies. Otherwise, if we didn't, we would have had more success. And we could see it especially with regard to health issues. And it was very apparent during COVID that people of African descent were being discriminated against. We are always discriminated against. I was just telling Mr. Ojo that I carry a diplomatic passport. And no matter where I go in the world, that passport has certain privileges attached to it. But once they see the passport, before they even open it, they see a black woman. And so I carry a black passport. So it doesn't matter whether your passport is from the Netherlands, whether your passport is from England, from CARICOM and so on. The fact is you are carrying a black passport, and they treat you that way. And so I am saying that we have to be able to build awareness within systems, because these border systems that ensure that the bodies of migrants from Africa are now in the Mediterranean the same way our bodies are in the Atlantic. The bodies of our ancestors must be stopped. If we do not attack these things and attack systems like the health system that make sure that we get poorer service in health centers globally, that many more of our people are dying, many more of our women are dying during childbirth, many of our babies are dying because they are not given the care that they need. So it's, Mr. Ojo, it is not only because we're not having our children, it's because they're also killing us. So, and so we are calling for us to do these things. Another very important thing that we didn't see a big emphasis on, because people are being part of it, they're pulling out of it, they're saying it does not exist, is the issue of climate justice. And we are hoping that the second decade, there will be more emphasis on climate justice. Climate justice is very important to people of African descent. Many of us live on small islands. Many of us live on marginalized lands because of plantation systems that pushed us out of the way. Many of us live on precarious mountainsides, in my country, for example. So when the rains come during hurricane, they just wash your house away. And so we are asking for climate justice. And in Africa, in the Caribbean, on the east coast of the United States, in parts of Latin America, we are the ones who suffer because of climate change, and we are not afforded the financing that we need for us to build better. So we want to ensure that the expectations that we have for the second decade, which was proclaimed on the 17th of December 2024, give us an opportunity to take concrete actions to confront the legacies of enslavement and colonialism and deliver reparatory justice. We tried very hard for the theme for the second decade to be on reparatory justice, but it doesn't matter what the theme is. We know what we're working on because we did not get that, but we are hopeful, as we said, that issues related to climate, justice and climate governance, equality within international institutions, because when you walk into the United Nations and you look at the people who work there, you don't really see us. And so we are asking for them to look at these issues. We are also calling for legal frameworks that will break down these systems. We ourselves must take measures to also. It is not because we live in countries where our leaders look like us that the second decade is not something that we have to put a committee together to say what we want for this country. And so it's one of the things I am hoping. At the beginning we called for conversations between governments and civil society groups. That's one of the things that we need to talk about. How are we going to advance the second decade so that this country can emerge with systems, educational, health, legal systems, equality systems that give access to all people. In conclusion then, I have jumped many things, so you will ask me questions afterwards. I think that partnerships are very important as we develop our communities. Specifics are important. Your specifics must be within the declaration. So I'm asking for you to build these alliances between governments, civil society, and international organizations. And finally, I want you to know that freedom, equality, and the representation that was promised by democracy has not materialized. So I was just in a conversation the other day on development and democracy, wondering if democracy is even relevant to us anymore, since it has not developed, it has not taken us into consideration. What it has done instead is to create a bigger stick to hit us, to say, you all are not democratic, we can invade your country. You all are not democratic, so we can put rules and regulations on your financial services. You all are not democratic because you all didn't elect the leader that we wanted you all to elect, and things like that. So we have to be able to speak to this thing. And let me say that finally, that in a world where racism and racial discrimination permeate every aspect of our lives, the fight for racial equality cannot waver. We cannot do this once in a while. We have to be consistent. We must be relentless, not just today, but every day moving forward and throughout the second international decade on people of African descent. I thank you. I'm here for the day.
Bang, 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 lanta vitera, lanta nostera, lanta vitera, lanta nostera, lanta nostera, lanta nostera, lanta nostera, lanta nostera. Bang, 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 carga nos llega tera. Agua sopilla la candela rumana bang, 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 bang. Lantanostera, 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 lantanostera. Perla di la mangi playa itera, pradera di fruminga y termita, conuco di airi viento di passat, solo sali lusa nos camenda, perla di sabana kuma magna, y ama di caoba la candela, cueva di fruminga cu termita, danos riqueza su ecosistema rumana.